If she ever learns the truth, she'll hate me. The words stopped Elena Hartwell in her tracks. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She hadn't even meant to be in that corridor. She had only been looking for a quiet place to escape the celebration. But now she stood frozen behind a marble column, her heart beating so hard she could hear it over the distant music drifting through the palace. The voice belonged to Ethan Vale, Beta of the Alpha King, the most respected man in the kingdom after the royal family itself. Elena carefully leaned toward the opening between the pillars. Ethan stood near one of the tall windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. Beside him was King Rowan Blackthorn. The king's expression was unreadable, but Ethan looked troubled, something Elena had never seen before. "You can't keep hiding it forever," Rowan said quietly. Ethan stared out at the gardens. "I know." "Then tell her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." Rowan sighed. "Nothing important ever is." Before Elena could hear more, footsteps echoed behind her. She immediately stepped back and hurried away, her pulse racing. She told herself it was none of her business. The palace was filled with secrets. But one thought refused to leave her mind. If she ever learns the truth, who was he talking about? And why did the possibility of it somehow make her chest ache? The grand ballroom glowed with golden light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while hundreds of guests laughed, danced, and celebrated. Tonight marked the first anniversary of Queen Sophia Hartwell's coronation. Everywhere Elena looked, people smiled at her twin sister. Sophia moved through the crowd with effortless grace, her golden gown shimmering beneath the lights. Beside her stood King Rowan, proud and protective. Together they looked like something out of a storybook. Elena loved her sister. She truly did. Sophia had never been cruel, never arrogant. Yet standing in her shadow had become as natural as breathing. Since childhood there had always been comparisons. Sophia was the beautiful one. Sophia was the chosen one. Sophia was the one everyone remembered. Elena was simply the other twin. The forgotten twin. She slipped through the crowd unnoticed, carrying a tray of glasses for one of the servants who had injured his ankle earlier that evening. Nobody questioned it. Nobody stopped her. People rarely noticed Elena enough to wonder what she was doing. As she crossed the room, a group of noblewomen passed nearby. "The queen grows more radiant every year," one said. Another nodded. "It's hard to believe she has a twin sister." The women laughed softly. "I know. It's like the moon goddess put all the luck into one child." Their words weren't meant for Elena to hear. That somehow made them hurt more. She kept walking, forcing herself to smile. She had spent years learning how to smile through disappointment. Near the edge of the ballroom, she paused beside a tall window. Beyond the glass, moonlight blanketed the palace grounds in silver. For a moment she imagined what it would feel like to be seen. Not as Sophia's sister. Not as a background figure in someone else's story. Just Elena. The thought felt foolish. Dangerous even. Yet before she could dismiss it, a familiar voice spoke beside her. "There you are." Elena turned sharply. Ethan Vale stood only a few feet away. His silver-gray eyes met hers with surprising warmth. The noise of the ballroom seemed to fade. He offered a small smile. "I've been looking for you, Elena." And for the first time all night, someone had called her by her name. Elena stared at Ethan for a moment, convinced she had heard him wrong. Out of hundreds of guests filling the ballroom, out of nobles, ambassadors, advisors, and members of the royal court, the beta of the kingdom had been looking for her. The thought felt almost absurd. "You were looking for me?" she asked quietly. Ethan's smile widened slightly. "That surprises you?" Elena almost laughed. It surprised her because nobody looked for her. Not intentionally. People looked for Queen Sophia. They looked for King Rowan. They looked for influential families and powerful wolves. Elena was usually the person standing just outside the frame of every important moment. Ethan seemed to notice her hesitation. "I wanted to make sure you were enjoying the evening." The question was simple. Ordinary. Yet it caught her completely off guard. She could not remember the last time someone had asked how she felt rather than what she was doing. "I am fine," she replied automatically. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That sounded practiced. Heat crept into her cheeks. Maybe it was. A faint chuckle escaped him. The sound was warm and genuine, and for reasons Elena could not explain, It eased something inside her. For a few moments they stood near the window, watching couples dance beneath the chandeliers. The orchestra played softly in the background while laughter drifted through the room. It should have been easy conversation, yet Elena felt strangely aware of every word. "The gardens look beautiful tonight," Ethan said. She glanced outside. Moonlight covered the palace grounds in silver and pale blue shadows. "They always do this time of year. You used to spend hours out there." Elena blinked. "What?" Ethan pointed toward a distant stone fountain visible through the glass. "When you were 16, you used to sit beside that fountain with a sketchbook every afternoon." Elena stared at him. "You remember that?" Of course. Her heart gave a small, unexpected flutter. She had not touched a sketchbook in years. Most people did not even know she liked drawing. Yet Ethan remembered where she sat nearly a decade ago. Before she could respond, a group of nobles approached the king and queen, drawing attention toward the center of the ballroom. Applause followed. As always, Sophia became the focus of every eye. Elena watched her sister smile gracefully beneath the lights. Sophia truly belonged here. She always had. "You look sad when you watch her," Ethan said gently. Elena immediately shook her head. "No. I am proud of her." "I know you are." His answer came without hesitation. "But that is not the same thing." Elena lowered her gaze. The polished marble floor reflected hundreds of dancing lights. For years she had buried certain feelings so deeply she barely acknowledged them herself. Not jealousy. Never jealousy. Something quieter. Lonelier. The feeling of constantly standing one step outside the life everyone else seemed destined to live. "Sophia deserves everything she has," Elena whispered. "I believe that." "So do I," Ethan replied. She looked up. There was no pity in his expression. No judgment. Only understanding. Somehow that was worse. Understanding felt dangerous. It made her want to say things she normally kept hidden. Before she could stop herself, the question slipped out. "Have you ever felt invisible?" Ethan's eyes softened. For a brief second, something passed across his face. Something almost painful. "More than you think." The answer surprised her. Ethan Vale was admired across the kingdom. Confident. Respected. Important. Invisible was the last word she would have used to describe him. Yet he spoke as though he understood exactly what she meant. A servant carrying refreshments passed nearby. Without looking, Ethan reached for a glass and handed it directly to Elena. Her favorite sparkling pear cider. She froze. "How did you know?" Ethan looked genuinely confused. "Know what?" "This is my favorite." Realization flickered across his face. Then he smiled. "Because it has been your favorite since you were 13. Elena's breath caught. Nobody remembered things like that about her. Nobody except Ethan, apparently. And for the first time all evening, the memory of what she had overheard earlier returned. "If she ever learns the truth, she will hate me." Looking into Ethan's calm silver eyes, Elena suddenly found herself wondering what truth could possibly be important enough to frighten a man like him. The celebration finally ended well after midnight, but Ethan's words followed Elena long after the last guests had retired to their rooms. "Because it has been your favorite since you were 13. The sentence should not have mattered. It was a small thing. A harmless thing. Yet lying awake beneath the soft glow of moonlight spilling through her bedroom window, Elena could not stop thinking about it. The palace was quiet now. The laughter and music had faded, leaving only the distant rustle of wind moving through the gardens below. Usually she enjoyed these peaceful hours. They were the only moments when she did not feel like she was standing in someone else's shadow. Tonight felt different. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered Ethan looking at her as though she was the only person in the room. The thought unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. By morning, she convinced herself she was overthinking everything. Ethan was kind. That was all. He was kind to everyone. The explanation sounded reasonable until breakfast. Elena entered the royal dining hall later than usual. Most of the court had already gathered around the long table. King Rowan sat near the center reviewing reports while Sophia spoke with several visiting ambassadors. Elena quietly slipped into an empty seat near the end of the table. Exactly where she preferred to be. She reached for a menu only to discover a plate already waiting for her. fresh blueberry pancakes, honey butter and sliced strawberries. Her favorite breakfast. Elena frowned. She had not ordered anything. Good morning. Ethan's voice came from across the table. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. You were late, so I asked the kitchen to prepare it. Elena stared at him. You remembered that too? Remembered what? What I like. He shrugged as though it were obvious. Of course. Elena looked down at the plate. A strange warmth settled inside her chest. Small, gentle, dangerous. Nobody paid attention to details about her. Not because people were cruel. They simply never needed to. Sophia naturally drew attention wherever she went. Elena had become accustomed to disappearing into the background. Yet somehow Ethan kept noticing things. Little things. The kind of things nobody else saw. Throughout the week, similar moments kept happening. On Tuesday, he left a newly published novel on her desk after overhearing her mention wanting to read it months earlier. On Wednesday, he stopped by the Palace Library and returned a book she had forgotten there. On Thursday, he asked about a painting she had completed years ago, and somehow remembered the exact landscape she had chosen. Each moment was small. Each moment could be explained away. Yet together they formed something impossible to ignore. By Friday, Elena found herself growing nervous whenever she saw him. Not because she disliked his attention. The opposite. She liked it far too much. That was the problem. One afternoon she sat alone in the palace greenhouse, surrounded by white roses and climbing ivy. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling, painting golden patterns across the stone floor. It had always been her favorite hiding place. Nobody ever came here. At least nobody except Ethan. I thought I might find you here. Elena looked up from her book. There he was again. Smiling. Finding her. Seeing her. The familiar warmth returned immediately. This time it frightened her. Why do you always know where I am? She asked before she could stop herself. Ethan hesitated. For the first time his smile faded slightly. Something complicated flickered behind his silver eyes. Something that looked suspiciously like sadness. Because I pay attention, he said quietly. Elena lowered her gaze. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the book. Nobody had ever paid attention before. Not like this. Not consistently. Not year after year. And that was exactly why she was beginning to panic. Because for the first time in her life she felt seen. And she was terrified of how much she wanted it to continue. After that afternoon in the greenhouse, Elena made a decision she immediately hated. She was going to avoid Ethan Vale. It sounded simple enough. Sensible even. The problem was that Ethan seemed to exist everywhere. If she visited the library, he appeared returning reports to the Royal Archives. If she walked through the gardens, he happened to be meeting with security officers nearby. If she attended a council luncheon, he was seated only a few chairs away. It was almost as though the palace itself refused to cooperate with her plan. For 3 days she managed to keep their conversations brief. Polite smiles. Quick greetings. Nothing more. She convinced herself it was for the best. Every interaction with Ethan left her feeling unsettled. Not because he did anything wrong. Because he made her feel something she did not know how to handle. Hope. On the 4th day, Queen Sophia found her arranging flowers in one of the smaller reception rooms. There you are, Sophia said cheerfully. Elena looked up and smiled. Unlike most people, Sophia always knew exactly where to find her. Should I be worried? Elena asked. Sophia laughed. Only if you forgot my birthday. That is 6 months away. Good answer. The sisters worked together for a few minutes, filling crystal vases with fresh white lilies. The familiar comfort of Sophia's presence helped quiet Elena's restless thoughts. Then Sophia casually said, Ethan asked about you yesterday. Elena nearly dropped a flower. What? Sophia blinked. He wondered if you were feeling well. Elena focused very carefully on arranging stems. Why? I do not know. He seemed concerned. Concerned. The word lingered in her mind long after Sophia changed the subject. Later that evening, Elena found herself standing on a second-floor balcony overlooking the palace courtyard. The air carried the scent of pine trees and approaching autumn. Below, servants crossed the grounds carrying lanterns as dusk settled over the kingdom. She heard footsteps approaching and immediately knew who it was. Somehow she always knew. Ethan stopped beside her. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence felt strangely comfortable. "Have I done something wrong?" he finally asked. Elena's heart sank. "No." "Then why are you avoiding me?" Direct. Honest. Very Ethan. She stared out at the courtyard lights flickering below. "I am not avoiding you. Elena." Her name sounded different when he said it. Softer somehow. More personal. She sighed. "You are the beta of the Alpha King." Ethan looked confused. And I am not important." The words escaped before she could stop them. The moment they were spoken, she wished she could take them back. Ethan became very still. "Do you really believe that?" She laughed quietly. "You know how this works. People remember Sophia. People remember Rowan. People remember you." Her voice softened. "Nobody remembers me." Ethan stared at her for several seconds. The fading sunlight caught the silver in his eyes. "That is not true." "It is." "No." The certainty in his voice surprised her. "It is not." Elena looked away first. The intensity of his gaze felt impossible to withstand. "You should not spend so much time with me." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Because people will talk. People always talk. You know what I mean." She did not need to explain further. Ethan held one of the highest positions in the kingdom. Advisors respected him. Nobles sought his approval. Future leaders watched his every move. Elena was simply the queen's sister. Nothing more. The distance between them felt enormous. Like standing on opposite sides of a river she could never cross. Yet when she finally glanced at him again, Ethan was looking at her with an expression she could not understand. Not pity. Not obligation. Something deeper. Something that made her pulse quicken. "You spend so much time worrying about how others see you," he said quietly. "Have you ever wondered how I see you?" Elena forgot how to breathe. And for the first time she realized she was no longer afraid of Ethan himself. She was afraid of the answer to that question. For the next 2 days, Elena did everything she could to avoid thinking about Ethan's question. "Have you ever wondered how I see you?" The words followed her through every hallway, every meal, every quiet moment when her mind should have been focused elsewhere. She never answered him. The conversation on the balcony had ended when a group of advisors arrived looking for the beta. Ethan had been called away before she could respond, and perhaps that was a blessing, because she had no idea what she would have said. Unfortunately, the palace seemed determined to answer the question for her. Rumors had a way of moving faster than reason. Elena first noticed it during a charity luncheon hosted by Queen Sophia. The event gathered noble families, community leaders, and representatives from neighboring territories. Normally Elena blended into the background without difficulty. This time felt different. As she crossed the room carrying a stack of donation records, conversations quieted when she passed. Not completely. Just enough. Just enough for her to notice. A knot formed in her stomach. Later, while reviewing guest lists near one of the reception tables, she overheard 2 noblewomen speaking behind her. "Have you seen them together?" one whispered. "The queen's sister and the beta?" The second woman gave a soft laugh. "Everyone has." Elena froze. Perhaps she finally realized proximity to power has its advantages. "You think she is interested in him? Would you not be?" More laughter followed. Elena quietly walked away before hearing the rest. Her face burned with embarrassment. By evening the rumors had spread throughout much of the court. Nothing openly cruel. Nothing dramatic. Just whispers. Questions. Speculation. Exactly the kind of attention Elena had spent her entire life trying to avoid. The next morning she considered staying in her room. Instead, she forced herself to attend breakfast as usual. Sophia immediately noticed something was wrong. "You look exhausted," her sister said. Elena managed a smile. "I did not sleep well." Sophia studied her for a moment. "Is something bothering you?" For one dangerous second Elena almost told her everything. The rumors. Ethan. The confusion she carried everywhere now. But looking at her sister's kind face made the words die in her throat. Sophia had enough responsibilities already. She did not need this added to them. "I am fine," Elena said. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You know you can tell me anything. Guilt twisted inside Elena's chest. She nodded, unable to meet her sister's eyes. Later that afternoon, she escaped to one of the quieter palace corridors. The sunlight streaming through tall windows painted long golden patterns across the marble floor. For the first time all day she felt alone. There you are. Elena closed her eyes. Of course it was Ethan. She turned slowly. His expression shifted the moment he saw her face. What happened? He asked. Nothing. Ethan folded his arms. That answer is becoming suspicious. Despite herself, Elena almost smiled. Almost. People are talking. Understanding immediately appeared in his eyes. About us. The words sounded strange spoken aloud. Ethan remained silent for several seconds. Does it bother you? Elena laughed softly. You are asking the wrong question. Then what is the right question? She looked away toward the window. Outside, the royal garden stretched beneath the afternoon sun. Beautiful. Ordered. Predictable. Unlike her thoughts. The right question is why they assume it could never be real. The moment the words escaped, silence filled the corridor. Elena felt her heart stumble. She had not meant to say that. She had not even realized she was thinking it. Slowly she turned back toward Ethan. His expression had changed. Something warm and hopeful flickered there before he carefully hid it. And for the first time, Elena realized the rumors were no longer what frightened her most. What frightened her was the possibility that part of her wanted them to be true. The corridor felt smaller after that. Quieter. As though the entire palace had stepped back and left only the two of them standing beneath the afternoon light. Ethan did not immediately answer. He simply looked at Elena with an expression she had never seen before. Not the calm confidence of the king's beta. Not the easy warmth he usually carried around her. This was something more vulnerable. Something carefully guarded. You should not have said that, he said softly. Elena's stomach tightened. Why? A faint smile touched his face, though it carried no humor. Because now it is much harder for me to keep pretending. The words sent a strange chill through her. Pretending what? For several seconds Ethan remained silent. Beyond the windows, the palace garden swayed gently beneath the breeze. Somewhere in the distance a bell rang, marking the passing hour. Yet neither of them moved. Do you remember the winter solstice ball 10 years ago? He finally asked. Elena frowned. Barely. You were 16. His gaze drifted toward the sunlight. You spent most of the evening hiding in the library because you hated formal dances. Surprise flashed across her face. How do you know that? Ethan let out a quiet breath. Because I spent half the night looking for you. Elena stared at him. Why would you do that? He laughed softly, though there was sadness in it. That is the question, isn't it? Her pulse quickened. Suddenly every small memory returned. Every moment. Every coincidence. Every detail he somehow knew. The books. The greenhouse. The sketchbook beside the fountain. The favorite breakfast. The sparkling pear cider. They no longer felt random. They felt connected. Intentional. Ethan. His eyes met hers again. You ask why I always know where you are. Elena could barely breathe. Yes. Because I notice you. His voice remained calm, but she could hear the truth underneath it. Years of truth. Years of restraint. I notice when you are happy. I notice when you are pretending to be happy. I notice when you disappear during large gatherings because too many people exhaust you. I notice when you skip lunch because you are reading. I notice when something is bothering you even when nobody else does. Elena felt her heart pounding against her ribs. Why? She whispered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the answer was already there. Because I have been paying attention for a very long time. Silence settled between them, heavy and fragile all at once. Elena remembered the countless years she had spent believing nobody truly saw her. Yet standing here now, she was suddenly confronted with the possibility that one person always had. Ethan took a careful breath. The truth is that this did not start a few weeks ago. His voice dropped lower. It did not start when the rumors began. Elena could not look away. Then when? A sad smile appeared on his face. Long before Sophia became queen. Long before Rowan claimed the throne. He paused. Long before you ever noticed me. The admission hung between them like a secret finally released into the open air. Elena felt the world tilt slightly beneath her feet. For years she had believed she was invisible. Yet somehow, while she was watching everyone else, Ethan had been watching her. And for the first time, she began to understand why the thought of telling her the truth had frightened him so much. Elena barely remembered how she returned to her room that evening. The conversation replayed endlessly in her mind, each word refusing to fade. Long before you ever noticed me. She stood beside her bedroom window watching darkness settle over the kingdom. Below, hundreds of lanterns glowed along the palace pathways like scattered stars. Usually the view comforted her. Tonight it only made her thoughts louder. Part of her wanted to dismiss everything, to convince herself she had misunderstood. But another part knew better. Ethan had not spoken like a man describing a passing interest. He had spoken like someone carrying a secret for years. The realization should have made her happy. Instead it terrified her. Because if Ethan had truly cared about her for that long, then why had he hidden it? Why had he looked so troubled whenever the subject came close to the truth? The answer arrived the following morning. Elena had spent most of the day helping Sophia organize documents for an upcoming diplomatic gathering. By late afternoon, she slipped away to the palace archives searching for a moment of quiet. The archives occupied one of the oldest wings of the palace. Towering shelves stretched toward vaulted ceilings, filled with records dating back generations. Few people visit it unless duty required it. Elena liked that. The silence felt safe. She wandered between rows of books until a familiar voice reached her from the far end of the chamber. You should tell her. Elena froze instantly. It was King Rowan. Curiosity pulled her closer before caution could stop her. Through a narrow gap between shelves, she spotted Rowan and Ethan standing beside a table covered in old documents. Neither man had noticed her. I already told you, Ethan said quietly. It is not that simple. Rowan folded his arms. It has been 7 years. Elena's breath caught. 7 years. She deserves the truth. Ethan looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a burden for far too long. And if the truth changes everything? Rowan's expression softened. Perhaps it is supposed to. Silence followed. Then Rowan picked up a worn folder from the table. You cannot keep hiding this forever. Ethan stared at the folder for several long seconds before taking it. Elena could not see the cover clearly, but she noticed something that made her heart skip. Her name. Elena Hartwell. Written across the front. The world seemed to narrow. Every instinct told her to step away. To leave before she learned something she was not supposed to hear. Yet she remained frozen in place. Rowan eventually departed, leaving Ethan alone in the archive. For several moments he simply stood there holding the folder. Then he carefully opened it. A single paper slipped free and drifted onto the floor. Ethan did not notice. He gathered the remaining documents and walked away. Only after the sound of his footsteps disappeared did Elena emerge from hiding. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The fallen page lay near the table. She hesitated. Then she picked it up. At first glance it appeared to be an official record from the Moon Oracle. Ancient royal markings decorated the edges. Near the center several names were listed. Sophia Hartwell, King Rowan Blackthorn, Ethan Vale, and finally Elena Hartwell. Her eyes moved lower. One sentence had been underlined years ago in fading ink. The second daughter shall alter the fate of the kingdom. Elena stared at the words in disbelief. Because beneath the sentence was a date. 7 years old. Exactly 7 years. Elena read the sentence 3 more times before her hands began to tremble. The second daughter shall alter the fate of the kingdom. The words seemed impossible. Unreal. For years she had lived as an afterthought in her own story. Yet this document suggested something entirely different. More troubling was the date beneath it. 7 years ago. Exactly the length of time Rowan had mentioned. Exactly the length of time Ethan had apparently been carrying a secret. She carefully returned the page to the table and hurried from the archives before anyone could see her. Questions followed her through every corridor. Had the prophecy come true? Had Sophia becoming queen fulfilled it somehow? Or was there something else she did not understand? Most importantly, why had Ethan hidden it from her? By the following morning, the answer arrived sooner than expected. A royal council meeting had been scheduled to discuss trade agreements with neighboring territories. Elena had no intention of attending. She rarely participated in official affairs. Yet halfway through breakfast, Sophia asked for her help organizing several records needed by the council. Unable to refuse, Elena carried the documents to the chamber. Shortly before the meeting began, the moment she entered, she sensed tension in the room. Advisors whispered in small groups. Several noble representatives stood near the windows exchanging worried looks. Something had happened. Rowan sat at the head of the long table, calm but serious. Ethan stood beside him reviewing reports. Elena immediately noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered. Her stomach tightened. Again. More whispers. More attention. She quietly placed the documents on the table and prepared to leave. Then one of the visiting nobles spoke. Perhaps we should address the matter directly. The room fell silent. Rowan looked up. What matter? The noble hesitated only briefly. The rumors concerning your beta and Lady Elena. Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Heat rushed into her face. Rowan's expression darkened with annoyance. Sophia looked genuinely confused. Ethan became completely still. The noble continued. Several families are concerned about perceptions within the court. Speculation is growing. It may become a distraction. Elena wished the floor would open beneath her feet. She had spent her entire life avoiding attention. Now she stood at the center of it. Another advisor cleared his throat. Perhaps some distance would be wise until the gossip fades. Distance. The word landed like a stone. Elena looked toward Ethan. His jaw tightened. For a moment she expected him to remain silent, to prioritize diplomacy, reputation, politics. Instead he stepped forward. No. The single word echoed through the chamber. Surprise rippled across the room. Ethan rarely raised his voice. He never openly challenged court opinion. Yet now every trace of hesitation had vanished. With respect, the noble began carefully. This concerns public perception. No, Ethan repeated. Calm. Certain. This concerns people discussing matters they do not understand. Silence followed. Elena stared at him. Nobody had ever defended her publicly before. Not because people disliked her. Because nobody had considered her important enough to defend. Yet Ethan stood before an entire council chamber without the slightest sign of regret. Rowan watched. Quietly from his seat. Sophia's eyes moved between them with growing realization. Then something unexpected happened. One of the older council members reached for a folder resting near the center of the table. A familiar folder. Elena recognized it instantly. The same royal file she had seen in the archives. The councilman frowned. If we are discussing misunderstandings, perhaps this should no longer remain sealed. Ethan's expression changed immediately. Do not. But the folder was already opening. And as ancient pages spread across the table beneath the council chamber lights, Elena realized the secret she had discovered was about to become public. The council chamber fell into complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ancient pages rested beneath the afternoon light while dozens of eyes focused on the documents that had remained hidden for 7 years. Elena felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Ethan stood motionless beside the table. Across from him, King Rowan watched with the calm expression of someone who already knew exactly what was written there. The older councilman adjusted his glasses and carefully unfolded the first page. This record was prepared by the Moon Oracle before the previous coronation cycle, he announced. Murmurs spread through the room. The Moon Oracle's prophecies were rarely discussed publicly. Some believed they shaped history. Others believed they merely revealed it. Either way, nobody ignored them. The councilman continued reading. 2 daughters shall be born beneath the same moon. Elena's breath caught. One shall stand beside the crown. The councilman's eyes lifted briefly toward Sophia. The other shall alter the fate of the kingdom. Silence returned. Sophia looked stunned. Several nobles exchanged confused glances. The councilman turned another page. The second daughter shall walk unseen for many years. Yet when she is finally recognized, Her choice shall influence the future of the throne, the people, and the kingdom itself. Elena felt as though the floor had vanished beneath her feet. She had spent years believing she was unimportant, invisible. Yet someone had written these words before she was old enough to understand them. The councilman slowly lowered the document. The prophecy never identified Queen Sophia as the second daughter. Shock rippled across the room. One noble stood abruptly. Then why was this hidden? Before anyone else could answer, Rowan spoke. Because the prophecy was never the important part. Every eye turned toward the king. Rowan looked toward Elena. His expression carried neither pity nor expectation, only honesty. The important part was allowing her to choose her own path. Elena stared at him. You knew. Rowan nodded. For years. Her gaze shifted toward Ethan. And you knew too. Ethan looked away briefly before meeting her eyes again. Yes. The truth hurt less than she expected. Perhaps because she already knew it. What hurt was understanding why he had hidden it. He had never wanted her to feel pressured by destiny. He had never wanted her to wonder whether people valued her because of a prophecy instead of who she was. Ethan stepped forward. The entire chamber seemed to disappear as he approached. I was afraid, he admitted quietly. A nervous laugh escaped Elena. You? Afraid? A faint smile touched his face. Constantly. Several council members looked bewildered. Nobody in the kingdom would have described Ethan Vale as uncertain. Yet here he stood openly admitting it. I was afraid that if you learned about the prophecy, you would think that was the reason I cared about you. His voice softened. But it never was. Elena's heart tightened. Ethan glanced toward the ancient documents before looking back at her. I noticed you long before I read those records. The room remained silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. I noticed the girl who hid in libraries instead of ballrooms. I noticed the girl who helped everyone without expecting recognition. I noticed the girl who believed she was standing in someone else's shadow when she had a light entirely her own. Tears blurred Elena's vision. For years she had wanted someone to see her. Not Sophia's sister. Not part of a prophecy. Just Elena. And somehow, without her realizing it, someone always had. Ethan smiled gently. The prophecy never told me who you were. His eyes never left hers. You did. The chamber faded around her. The whispers. The rumors. The comparisons. The years of feeling forgotten. For the first time in her life, none of it mattered. Because she finally understood something she had never believed possible. She had never been invisible. She had simply been waiting for the right person to see her. And he had been there all along.